Hello, it's Miss Cathy, sometimes known as Nana, and I'm a storyteller with the High Prairie Storytelling Group. Usually we come out to classrooms and tell our stories, but with all that's been going on this year, we've decided that it's best to provide you with stories on video. So that's what I'm doing today. Now, usually when I'm going out to a classroom, I let my audience know that I'm ready to start my stories by putting on a storytelling hat. I have a whole bunch. And usually when I put my storytelling hat on, my students know that it's time to turn their listening ears on and their speaking voices off so that they can use their imaginations to make the story happen in their mind. And in order to do that, you've got to turn your voice off so you can concentrate, right? And so if you are ready, I will put my storytelling hat on and we'll begin. I know I'm ready. I've missed it so much being able to come out to your classrooms. It's nice that I have this opportunity to share stories with you. I just miss seeing your smiling faces. Okay, you'll notice that I have a world map behind me. When I tell my stories, I do, if it's possible, if it applies, I like to share with my students where in the world the stories came from. Today's stories are three of Aesop's fables. Raise your thumb up if you've heard of Aesop before, or Aesop's fables. Okay, he was a slave thousands and thousands of years ago. He was a slave and a storyteller in Greece. And Greece is a set of islands about here in the Mediterranean. Okay, here's the United States of America, in case you weren't sure. So you'd have to get to Greece, you'd have to go from the United States all the way across the North Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Ocean and find Greece. This first story is called A Country Mouse and a City Mouse. And I forgot to mention that all of Aesop's fables or stories include a lesson. They call it a moral at the end, and it's a lesson. It's something that we can learn from on the best way to live. And so you'll be hearing the first moral of this story, The Country Mouse and the City Mouse. I have to tell you that there were two mice, and one lived in the country and one lived in the city, and they were cousins. And even though they lived and behaved very differently, they did care about each other. And the city mouse decided that he would go and visit his cousin in the country. When he got to the cousin's house, he found him full of vim and vigor, and he was a very nice mouse who immediately offered his cousin some refreshments. The country mouse had beans and bacon and bread and cheese. Sounds yummy to me. But the city mouse turned his nose up at that food. He did not think it was very tasty. He said, "Oh, cousin, I don't know how you can stand to live here and eat this way every day. Why, if you visited me in the city, it would not be very long before you would decide to stay and never come back for this poor food." Well, no sooner said than done. Those mice set out for the city, and they arrived at the city mouse's house very late at night. The city mouse had some good manners, and so he immediately said to his cousin, "Why, cousin, we've been traveling very long. You must be hungry. Please follow me and I'll show you where we keep the really good food." And so the City Mouse escorted his cousin into the dining room, and there on the table were the remains of a wonderful feast, and the mice immediately started chowing down on ale and cakes and jellies. Everything tasted just wonderful. Suddenly they heard barking and growling and viciousness, and the country mouse said, "Cousin, what's that noise?" And the city mouse said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just the dogs." "Just the dogs?" said the country mouse. "Why, I don't like to eat with that kind of noise." Well, suddenly the door to the dining room burst open, and two huge dogs came running in, snarling and barking, and drool hanging from their jowls, and they were ready to eat those mice. Well, the mice had to jump up and run for their lives. The country mouse, when they were safe, said, "Well, that's it for me, cousin. Bye-bye." And the city mouse said, "Cousin, you're leaving so soon?" And the country mouse said, "Yes, I'd rather have beans and bacon in peace than ale and cake in fear." And that is the end of the city mouse and the country mouse. Now, I have a joke for you. And this joke, usually I let you read the jokes and tell them when I'm with you in your classrooms. Obviously, we can't do that. So I'll do the jokes for you. What did one penny say to another penny? Well, one penny said to the other penny, "We make sense." Get it? We make sense. Okay. All right. This next story is about a boy, and he was a little bit older than you, I would say. The story is called The Shepherd's Boy. Thumbs up if you know what a shepherd is. Well, looks like some of you have a good idea. A shepherd takes care of a flock of sheep or goats. The Shepherd's Boy. As I said, this boy was a little bit older than you, and it was his job to be the shepherd for the sheep that lived in the town, that all the townspeople owned. And they wanted to make sure that they were kept safe during the day. So the sheep were kept in a meadow, not too far from town, but far enough. And it was right on the edge of a forest. Well, as I say, it was not close to town, and the boy tending the sheep would get lonely and bored, as I'm sure all of you would too. One day he decided he wanted to do something to stir up a little excitement and maybe get him some conversation. So he decided that he would pretend that there was a wolf in the meadow. You can call with me. Now, he had to shout very loud, but we don't want to shout inside school. We want to use our inside voices, right? So we can pretend as we're shouting, right? You ready? Wolf! Wolf! And when the townspeople heard the boy shouting wolf, they ran out of their homes. They jumped out of their shops, and they started hustling up the hill towards the meadow where the sheep were. When they got there, they did not find a wolf because you know why, because the boy was pretending. But a few people did stay and talk with the boy, so he had some conversation, and it certainly had been exciting when everybody had come rushing up the hill. The boy decided to try it again. It worked the first time. So the next day, the boy was sitting in the meadow, bored, lonely, and he decided to call out, join me, "Wolf! Wolf!" Once again, people ran out of their homes, they jumped out of their shops, and hustled up the hill to the meadow where the boy and the sheep were. And when they got to the meadow, they found no wolf, but they did find the boy laughing. Oh, he thought it was hilarious that he had tricked all the townspeople again. Well, it came to pass that very soon afterwards, a wolf really did come out of the forest, and he started bothering those sheep. He wanted one of those sheep for his lunch. Well, the boy immediately started shouting, ready? Sheep! Wolf! Wolf! And no one ran out of their homes. No one jumped out of their shops and hustled up the hill towards the meadow. They all figured he was tricking them again. And the wolf ended up having a very fine lunch from that boy's herd of sheep. Well, later on, the boy was upset and he was kind of complaining about it to one of the elders of the town. He said, I cried wolf and nobody came to help, and now I've lost a sheep. And the elder said, well, no one believes a liar even when they're telling the truth. That's the moral. Okay, we have listened to 2 lovely stories and 1 joke. I have 1 more story for you, and I have 1 more joke for you, but we've been sitting for quite a while here. I think maybe because I know how hard it is to sit quietly and listen to a grown-up telling stories, we need to get our wiggles out. And so we will wiggle our bottoms and wiggle our hands and wiggle our head, and then we'll stretch way up high. Oh, that feels so good. And stretch way down low. Oh, that feels good. And stretch out to the side and this side, and then wiggle again, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And now hands in your laps. Very, very good. Listening ears back on. Speaking voices off. 1 more joke for you. So, what letter of the alphabet has the most water? Anybody know? The letter of the alphabet that has the most water is the letter C. Get it? Like all the seas in the world, all the oceans are seas? Yeah, okay. I hope you remember that joke. That's a good one. All right, 3rd and last story of the session. This story by Aesop, it's another fable. It's called Androcles. Now, Androcles was a slave, very much like Aesop. And he lived thousands and thousands of years ago, very much like Aesop. Well, one day, Androcles found a way to escape his master. And he started running. And he was running and running and running. He was running till he was exhausted. He thought surely someone was following him, chasing him, and trying to get him back. When he couldn't run any longer, he looked about him and found that he was in a big forest. And as he stood quietly, he heard moaning, oh, and groaning, oh. And he walked towards the sounds, and as he did, he found a gigantic lion laying in the middle of a clearing in the forest with his paws crossed over him, and he was licking his paw. And as Androcles came closer, he noticed that this lion's paw was all red and swollen and bleeding. Well, Androcles worked up his courage, and he went even closer to the lion, and he noticed that there was a big thorn in the lion's paw that was causing all the problems. So Androcles very carefully pulled that thorn from the lion's paw. Oh, it felt so good to have it out. And then he wrapped the lion's paw in some bandaging, some old cloth, and the lion immediately stood up and began licking Androcles on his face and his hands and his arms like a great big old dog. Well, the lion was so grateful to Androcles that he led Androcles to his cave, and he let Androcles live in his cave for a while. And every evening, the lion would bring Androcles fresh meat from his kill. And they lived this way very happily for a short time, but it wasn't very long before soldiers came and captured Androcles and Androcles's lion. They were taken to Rome and brought before, well, Androcles was brought before the emperor of Rome. And the emperor said, Androcles, you are a slave. It is against the law for you to run away and try to get away from your master. For breaking this law, you will be thrown to the lions. Well, Androcles was frightened, as well he should be. He was taken away to the jail, and the lion was kept locked up in a cage for many days, not given anything to eat or drink. The emperor and his people wanted to make sure that lion was very hungry and hangry. Well, the day came when soldiers came and they took Androcles by his arms and dragged him into the arena and left him standing in the middle of the arena where the emperor was, and all of his royal court were there, and many people from all around the surrounding towns had come to see the spectacle as well. Suddenly, the cage door opened and a gigantic lion came rushing out of the cave, snarling and roaring and running towards Androcles when he came right up to him and stopped. And he began licking Androcles's face. Yes, it was Androcles's lion, and Androcles's lion recognized as Androcles and would no more hurt him than hurt his own cub. And Androcles was hugging the lion, and everyone in the arena was just amazed to see a lion, instead of mauling a person, kissing and licking this person. Androcles was brought in front of the emperor once again, and the emperor asked him to tell him his story. Well, Androcles told him all that had occurred, and the emperor was very impressed. He gave Androcles his freedom and made him a free man, no longer a slave, and he allowed Androcles's lion to be set free back in his home forest. And the moral of this story is gratitude is the sign of a noble soul. That means a good soul. Yeah. So, thumbs up if you can think of 2 things that you are grateful for. And maybe after the video is over, maybe your teacher will allow you to share, maybe in small groups or something, share 1 or 2 things that you're each grateful for. And usually at this point of my program, we have a few moments to answer questions or to talk about the stories and get some understanding as to what we remember. So we'll do that with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, okay? So in the first story, the country mouse went to visit his cousin in the city. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Well, technically thumbs up, because he did end up going to visit his cousin in the city, but that wasn't the first thing that happened, was it? Okay, but it was correct that he did go to visit his cousin. Okay, second comprehension question. The mice When they were in the city, the mice were frightened by the city mouse's house cat. You're right. Thumbs down. It was not a cat that lived in the house, but two big dogs. Remember that? Okay. Third question for you. In the second story, The Shepherd's Boy, uh, the shepherd's boy was watching over the herd of goats. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs down. They weren't goats, were they? They were sheep. Right. Very good. Okay. Last question. Androcles was a slave, and he helped a lion in the desert. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Right. Thumbs down. They were not in a desert, were they? They were in a forest. Very, very good. Good job, children. I am so glad that you've allowed me to be with you here today and to share some stories. And I hope that you someday will share these stories with someone that you care about. Until then, goodbye and keep telling those stories.